Welcome back, everyone, to another week of Ramban ala Parsha. This week we have the great zchus of reading Parshas Vayigash, which I personally love because at the end of, it basically has the culmination of the selling of Yosef and the whole pain we felt in Miketz, waiting for Yosef to give in and to share and to tell the truth and for the brothers to recognize it. All of it comes to a culmination at the very, very beginning of Parshas Vayigash, and that's what I want to focus on mostly today. And particularly on the soliloquy, the speech of Yehuda, which I think, I have no evidence, I didn't do a check on this, but I think it's the longest uninterrupted speech in the Torah. It's 16 psukim from Pasuk Yud Ches till the end of the parak, and the end of the parak ends with Pasuk Lamed Dalet, in which Yehuda speaks to Yosef uninterrupted. And the Ramban is focused on, what's the purpose of the speech? We all know what happens at the end of the speech, and we all know that it worked, but was that the purpose, and what's Yehuda really doing? So the Ramban, the parsha begins, Vayigash elav Yehuda vayomer bi Adoni, Yedaberna avdecha davar ba'oznei Adoni va'al yichar apecha be'avdecha ki chamocha kefaro. And it's almost impossible to read the psukim for that pshat, because we know the medrashim, ki chamocha kefaro. I don't respect Paro, I don't respect you, I can hurt Paro, I can hurt you, Paro doesn't keep his word, you don't keep your word. But says the Ramban, the Pshuto Shel Mikra seems to say otherwise. Says the first Ramban of the Parsha, Leimor ki divarim mu'atim yidaber, lo yihiyu alav latorach. Right? You're speaking to the second most powerful ruler in Egypt, the second most powerful person in Egypt. So you want to tell him, I'm not going to talk forever, even though 16 psukim, by the Torah standards, is forever. I just want to make one point to you. I'm not asking for a lot of your time. The main point, the one point that Yehuda is trying to make to Yosef is, please take me and let Binyamin go. That's really the only request. When you get through all of the details and all the other stuff in the psukim, by the way, not much of which, I want to be careful how I say this, some of which doesn't seem to support what we've read before. But the main point is, I want you to keep me as a slave and let Binyamin go. The rest is just icing. The rest is just, smoke and mirrors. Yomar al yicha apecha ki al divarai lefanecha ki chamocha kifaro. Uv'mora gadol ani medaber lefanecha kilo ani medaber lifnei paro. No, I have great respect for you, Yosef, but I want you to accept me instead of Binyamin. Okay, now by the way, there is no precedent, there is no halachic precedent, there is no legal precedent for taking one prisoner instead of another. Yes, it's true, Yehuda's probably better than Binyamin at being a slave, and Yehuda's stronger, and Yehuda's all these different things. But he's asking Yosef for something unprecedented. One person is a thief, again, air quotes around thief, and he's going to take another person who had nothing to do with the crime, to suffer instead of him. That's the main point of the speech. And then the pasuk continues, the next pasuk. Adoni sha'alat avadav leimor hayesh lachem av o ach. You asked us, do we have a father or a brother? Neither of which is actually true. He didn't ask them that, they volunteered that. Says the Ramban, second Ramban in the Parasha, Pasuk Yutes. Lo yadati tam la'arichut divrei Yehuda b'sipur masha yakfar beinehem umasha amruzal. He says, I don't know why Yehuda goes off into all these details about what already happened. Again, I don't think it really happened. But that's no claim. When a ruler tells them, you need to bring someone in front of me, he didn't tell Binyamin to come so that he can acquit him of crimes that Binyamin hadn't yet committed. What kind of claim is it? How come you asked Binyamin to come? He didn't have in mind that Binyamin was going to steal the Gavia. But Yosef was right. He looked at Binyamin, and he gave him a special bracha of chen. ונתן להם בר כאשר יאכלון שאת, יותר מן הכסף שהביאו לו כאשר פירשתי. ומה לעשות לו? What's going to happen? Says the Ramban, Yosef basically kept his word. He honored the brothers. He had a meal with them, all been in the zchus of Binyamin. What should he have done now that Binyamin, stole the Gavia? Va'asher yireli al derech hapshat, she'einam rak tachanunim l'ha'ir rachamav. No, Yehuda was tugging at his heartstrings. It was just to make Yosef feel bad. Ki chashav Yehuda, ki ha'elokim hu yarei kasher amar lo. Right? Yosef already told them, et ha'elokim ani yarei. So Yehuda saw him as a moral person, and he's basically trying to make him feel bad. V'kasher nahagim mohem chemla ki yarei ched lenachem otam al atzar she'asa lahem. And he kind of apologized for locking them up in jail. V'zeh inyan hasipur. Amar lo, anachnu ba'ones higadnu ba'achinu zeh mipnei shelat adoni. Yehuda says to him, we accidentally revealed to you that we have another brother because you asked us. V'lo hodinu gam kein lahorido lefanecha k'mitzvatcha harishona. We didn't volunteer to bring him down to Mitzrayim, as you commanded us. Rak amarnu ki lo yuchal anar la'azov et aviv. We told you from the start. Binyamin is the youngest son of Yaakov. Yaakov loves him desperately. He can't come on his own. But in the end, we had no choice. If we wanted to live, we ran out of food. If we wanted to live, we had to bring him. We were starving. Ki amarta lo tosifun lirot panai. You told us, don't return without Binyamin. Now, the Ramban is hinting at something significant here. How long was the period of time between when Yosef sent the brothers the first time and locked Shimon up in jail and told him, don't come back without your little brother, until they actually did it? So the sense you get here is it took a while. V'lo ratza avinu lishmoa ad hayotenu kulanu b'sakana lashuv lishbor ma'at ochel. When we came home, we told our father that Yosef said that the ruler of Egypt says we have to bring Binyamin. And he said no. So then finally, when they ran out of food, he had no choice but to give in. He's going to die a painful, painful death. I'm sorry. Therefore, L'rachem aleinu v'al hazaken v'kach oti tachat hana'ar le'eved olam. Yehuda says, please take me. That's the whole point of the speech. He's just making Yosef feel bad. Ki tov ani mimenu u'lecha tiyat tzedakah. You're right. You're under no obligation to do this. It would be a righteous deed if you did it. V'zeh tam kol haparsha. Says the Ramban, that's the simple point of the speech. The whole point of the speech is to convince Yosef that he should take Yehuda as a slave and he should let Binyamin go back, because if Binyamin doesn't return to Yaakov Avinu, Yaakov will be devastated and will die of his sadness. Okay, and this ties in with what they said before, and that's the main point of Yehuda's speech. But the Ramban covers both bases here, because there is something else, and it's hard to miss the fact that Yehuda is somehow accusing Yosef of having a special interest in Binyamin, of being interested in something that he had no reason to be interested in. I'm skipping a bunch of lines, and then the Ramban says, Aval yesh b'seiter divarav shahaya ma'aseh hagavia tachbula me'ito laha'alilam. Says the Ramban, but there's a subtext to what Yehuda is saying to Yosef. And the subtext is that it's not really true, that the stealing of the Gavia never happened, and that you set him up. Ki lama yivakesh lirot al korcham. We told you no. We told you Yaakov Avinu is not going to let Binyamin come, and you demanded that Binyamin came. What a coincidence now that having demanded that Binyamin came, you've accused him of this crime, right? Until now, the sense you get is that somehow he did it. He didn't do it. The brothers know he didn't do it. It doesn't make any sense that he would have done it. But they accepted the truthfulness of Yosef. V'kach amru b'breshit rabbah. Amar lo Yehuda, teida lecha, sheba'alila bata aleinu. The whole thing was a subterfuge. You had this whole plan from the beginning. Kama medinot yardu likach ochel. Klum sha'alta otam kemo sha'alta lanu. Many nations sent representatives to buy food in Egypt. Did you give them a hard time the way you gave us a hard time? Shema bitcha anu mevakshim o achotenu atam mevakesh. Do you want to marry into the family that you have to know how many brothers and who's who and what's what, and that we have to bring the youngest brother in front of you? We told you we have a younger brother. That should be enough. Yomru ki zeh haya nirmaz bidvarav. Says the Ramban, Yehuda didn't say it outright. He didn't accuse Yosef of anything outright, but between the lines, that was the point. The point of the speech was, please take me and not Binyamin, and presumably that had an impact on Yosef, right? Yosef is listening to the speech and watching Yehuda do something heroic, and it's not just heroic, it's something that, Yehuda wouldn't have done for Yosef. And Yosef seeing this change in his brothers. But at the same time, says the Ramban, Yehuda's hinting at something more. Yehuda's saying, we told you from the start, we have a younger brother. We told you from the start, we have an older father. We told you from the start how connected they are. And you insisted that we bring him. And oh, what a surprise. Now, you've planted the gavia in his knapsack. He's not really accusing him directly of planting it, but he's saying, what a surprise. Now that he's here, you're telling us he has to stay. Now, we assume that we know why Yosef did this. Presumably, he wants to talk to Binyamin and find out whether the brothers have really done tshuva. He wants to understand whether Binyamin is at any risk of being at home with the brothers. Yosef has real concerns, and he really wants to keep Binyamin with him. And presumably, had Yehuda not made this amazing speech and not touched Yosef's emotions the way that he did, that's what would have happened. The brothers would have left. Binyamin would have been taken into Yosef. Yosef would have told him who he was and would have established what the facts are and what life is like in the house of Yaakov Avinu. Okay, but that didn't play out, and didn't play out for good reasons. Let's go to Pasuk Chaf Daled. Says Yehuda, Vayhi ki alinu al avdecha avi, vanaged lo eit divrei Adoni. The second we got back to our father, we told him what you said. Amar, in the Ramban now, Chaf Daled, ki Amar, ki bivo'am elav miyad higidu lo shelo yosifu lirod panav below achehem hakatan. Right? The day we got home, and it's hard to know, was it a week ago, was it a month ago, was it a year ago? The day we got home, we said to our father, we can't go back without Binyamin. V'lo aval l'shalcho, and he said no. I'm not letting Binyamin go. V'hayamaniach lo Shimon b'ma'asaro. And understand this, says Yehuda to Yosef. He kept one of the brothers in jail so that Binyamin wouldn't have to come. That's how serious the fear was about Binyamin. V'zeh ta'am vayomer avinu shuvu shivu lonu mat ochel ki lo ratza lehodot l'shalcho b'chol asher amarnu right? We tried very hard. We tried to convince our father, we have to bring Binyamin back with us. And our father said no. At every turn, he said no. At the end, when we ran out of food, when we're going to starve to death, our father said, okay, I have no choice. I have to send Binyamin back with you. But you should understand, that's how serious it was. And this fits in with both themes of the Ramban. On the one hand, Yehuda is convincing Yosef of how it is that he should let Binyamin go and he should keep Yehuda. On the other hand, he's also hinting at Yosef that his special interest in Binyamin, makes all the things that happened to him slightly questionable. And now a really, really important part of the story. Yehuda continues, Vayomer avdecha avi elenu atem yedatem ki shinayim yaldali ishti. And the Ramban sees a lot in those words, yaldali ishti. Pasuk Chav Zayin, says Ramban, Im yomar shehu yachid li'imo, ma ta'am bezeh shetered sevato b'ra'ah she'ola. Okay, fine. He's the only child left from his mother, but so what? Why should that make my father so miserable? Why would that end Yaakov's life? So he says, Acharei sheyesh lo kama banim rabim u'bnei banim v'imo kfar meita. Yaakov has many, many children, and his mother's already dead. Lo tivke alav b'fanav. Right? I'm not going to cry in front of you. Aval hatam ki Yaakov lo lakach isha mida'ato rak Rachel. When he says, Atem yatem ki shnaim yalda li ishti, ishti means Rachel. Yehuda is saying to Yosef, I acknowledge that Rachel was Yaakov Avinu's only wife. Vahatam ki Yaakov lo lakach isha midato rak Rachel. His only wife who he wanted to marry, lechatchila, who he planned to marry, was Rachel. V'zetam yalda li ishti. Ki lo noldu li mi isha asher hi ishti birtzoni rak shnayim. The truth is, I only have 2 children from the wife I wanted to marry. All the other wives were accidents. V'samti ahavati bahem kilu heim yichidim li. And I invested all my love in them as if they're my only 2 sons. V'hashar, and imagine how hard this is for Yehuda to say. V'hashar kivnei pilagshim heim elai. The other sons, yes, they're my sons, but they're as if they're sons of concubines. They're not sons of real wives. Va'achiv meis, and Yosef is dead. V'zel levado b'ni yichidi asher ahavti. This is my last real son, who I love. V'lachein yaktim hakatuv Rachel u'Leah. That's why the psukim always say Rachel first. Ki Rachel u'Leah asher banu shtehem et Beit Yisrael. Right? The pasuk in Ruth says Rachel first. Vayikra l'Rachel u'Leah hasadeh. Ki hi hakodemet b'machshavto. Right? We say in Hallel, Eim habanim smecha. Moshivi akeret habayit. Who's the akeret habayit? That's Rachel. Eim habanim smecha, the mother of all the multiple children, that's Leah. Right? And so there's 2 things going on here in the story that the Ramban is hinting at. The first is Yehuda's explaining to Yosef, as if Yosef didn't know, why Yaakov Avinu was so attached to Binyamin. But under the surface, what Yosef is hearing is that Yehuda is acknowledging something that must have been a source of tension in the house. Yehuda is acknowledging, no, my father fell in love with your mother, not my mother. You know, my mother was a manipulation that Yaakov had to marry her. But the real wife is Leah, and the real children are you and Binyamin. Now, obviously, Yehuda didn't know who he was speaking to at the time, but the multiple levels of understanding of the speech between Yehuda and Yosef plays out nicely here, where Yosef is hearing this. And therefore, we finally come to the pasuk. The beginning of Perek Mem Hey says the Torah, after this long speech, all in first person of Yehuda, V'lo yachol Yosef lehitapek lechol hanitzavim alav. Vayikra hotziu chalish me'alai, v'lo amad ish ito behitvada Yosef el achav. It was too much for Yosef to take, and he's overcome by emotion. So first of all, it pays, and as close readers of the Torah, we have to ask ourselves, what was it that moved Yosef so much? Right? When you go back and you read the story, you read the speech of Yehuda carefully, as the Ramban has done, right? The main point is, I want to replace Yehuda, I want to replace Binyamin as the slave forever. And the sense you get is that, that must have been moving. The other things are also moving. The fact that Yehuda is acknowledging that Rachel was the one true wife and not Leah. The fact that Yehuda is acknowledging how much his father loves Binyamin. The fact that Yehuda is telling Yosef and trying to get him emotionally invested in the story, all that must have mattered. Now, it's not a Ramban, but Rav Yoel Ben Nun has a famous piece on why Yosef didn't contact his father and his brothers when he became prime minister. And he makes the point that Yosef might have thought that Yaakov was in on the plan. Avram had 2 sons. He sent away Ishmael. He kept Yitzchak. Yitzchak had 2 sons. He sent away Esav. He kept Yaakov. Yaakov had many, many sons. If the brothers came to Yaakov and said to him, listen, it's him or us. There are 10 of us. There's only one of him. Right? Choose. Maybe Yaakov Avinu said that. And originally when the brothers came and they said that Yosef was missing, that played into Yosef's idea. That maybe they know that Yosef's alive, but no one's looking for him because that's the price of family unity. But now, Yehuda accidentally says something that's not true. But he says something that's not true that moves Yosef. Vayetze ha'echad me'iti va'omar ach tarov toraf v'lo re'isiv adhena. Right? I had 2 sons from Rachel. One of them left me. He's lost. V'omar ach tarov toraf. And says Reb Yoel, maybe that's what moved Yosef. Yosef realized he'd been wrong all these years. His father wasn't part of it. His father may have been mourning him this whole time, thinking he was eaten by a wild animal. And therefore he gives in. Okay? Now we come back to our pasuk, Mem Hey Aleph, Lo Yachol Yosef Li'itapek. And here, it's not that this Ramban is says something we wouldn't have thought of. We never imagine this situation at all. I think one of the wonderful things about the Ramban, and certainly how he reads Psukim, is the Ramban's wondering, what did it look like? Who was standing there? Lo Yachol Yosef Li'itapek. In front of who? Was everybody there? And so I'm picking up in the middle of Mem Hey Aleph. V'hanachon be'enai, says the Ramban. Shehayu sham mi beit paro umin hamitzrim anashim rabim. Standing there as Yehuda is talking to Yosef, right? We like to imagine that Yehuda went for a walk with Yosef, on the banks of the Nile, no one's there. But he says, no, they're in the palace. Everybody's watching it. Everybody's listening to it. And they're moved by the speech. Anashim rabim yechalu panav limchol levinyamin ki nichmeru rachamehem al tachnunei Yehuda. V'lo yachol Yosef lehitchazek lekulam. All the people in the grandstand, if you imagine, there's like a big court, and the people are there, and they're all saying to Yosef, come on, give in. Don't be so mean. Take Yehuda. Let Binyamin go. They were moved by the story. Yehuda's not just talking to Yosef, he's playing to the crowd. And Yosef can't stand up to that pressure. Vayikra la'avadav, I'm sorry. V'lo yachol Yosef lehitchazek lekulam. Vayikra la'avadav. Hotziu kalish nachri me'alai ki adaber imahem. I want to talk to the brothers myself. I don't want to humiliate them. There's a big question in the Psukim whether Yosef completely forgave the brothers or not. But at this point, the sense you get is he doesn't want the Egyptians to know that the brothers sold him. Vayetzu me'alav. Uvidseitam me'alav natanet kalo bivchi. Vayishmeu Mitzrayim va'anshe beit Paro hamutzaim me'alav ki odam bechater chitzona. They had just made it right outside of the palace walls. They heard Yosef crying. They didn't know what he said, but they heard it. V'yitachen ki perush hanitzavim alav mishartav homdim lefanav. Okay, maybe it wasn't like some big scene where people come to watch what's going on between the prime minister and these people. Could have been just his servants. He kicked them out. He was angry. I want you to get out. I want to just talk to these people. He wanted to tell the brothers, to acknowledge to the brothers that they sold him, and he didn't want anybody else to know it. If the Egyptians know the truth, it would be bad for Yosef and bad for his brothers. They're rebellious people. Lo yaguru ba'artzenu. I don't want them to live here. V'lo yidruchu ba'armenotenu. I don't want them to be in the palace. Bagdu ba'achehem gam ba'avihem Bagdu mashi ma ya'asu b'melech u'ba'amo v'gam b'Yosef lo ya'aminu od. It would bring Yosef all the way back down to where he was originally. If his brothers hated him so much that they sold him and they let him stay in Mitzrayim all these years, that's unbelievable. The Egyptians can rightly say to Paro, we don't want that. You can't trust these people. If they could sell their brother, they could certainly rebel against you, Paro. And Yosef is the person who caused all this. Let's get rid of them. So Yosef, it's in Yosef's interest for the Egyptians not to hear, and it's in the brothers' interests for the Egyptians not to hear, and therefore he kicked them all out. Okay? Now, at the end of the day, there's an interesting issue that we should deal with, that it's not directly related, but it raises the issue, which is, did Yaakov Avinu ever know the truth? Did Yaakov Avinu ever know that the brothers sold Yosef to Mitzrayim, that they threw him in a pit, they took him out, and the Yishmaelim and whoever it was took him to Mitzrayim? Did Yaakov know this? So the Ramban has an idea, and he sees it in the Pasuk. We're still in Perek Mem Vav. This will be the last one we do. Now we're up to Pasuk Chav Zayin. The end of Perek Mem Hey. Says the Torah, Vayidabru elav et kol. They're now telling Yaakov Avinu what happened. Vayidabru elav et kol divrei Yosef asher diber aleihem, vayar et ha'agalot asher shalach Yosef laseit oto, vatichi ruach Yaakov avihem. And it's Vayidabru elav et kol divrei Yosef. Ani Yosef asher mechartem oti heina. Wait, did he tell him that also? Says the Ramban, no. Yera'eli al derech hapshad, says the Ramban, I think the simple pshat is, Shalo hu gadli Yaakov kol yamav ki achiv machru et Yosef. Yaakov never ever knew, or never was told during his lifetime, that the brothers sold Yosef. Aval chashav, so what did he think? Chashav ki hayat toeh basadeh, he got lost. V'hamotzim oto likachu u'mecharu oto al Mitzrayim. The people who found him sold him to Mitzrayim. It happened all the time. Ki achav lo ratzu lahagid lo chatatam af ki yaru lenafsham. The brothers had no interest in telling Yaakov the truth, because they were terrified. He would get angry at them. Pen yiksof v'yikalem, he'd curse them. Ka'asher asa b'Ruvain v'Shimon v'Levi, like the first three brachot. V'Yosef b'musaro hatov lo ratza lahagid lo. And Yosef, out of being a good person, being convinced that it was the right thing, didn't want to tell the father the horrible truth. Ulekach ne'amar, therefore, says the Ramban in next week's Parsha, Vayitzavuel Yosef lemor avicha tzivo lifnei moto lemor, right? Ana son of pesha achei avihem v'chatatam ki ra'agim alucha, right? When the brothers, the messengers come to Yosef to say, Yaakov said, please forgive your brothers, it was a lie. V'ilu yada Yaakov b'inyan hazeh haya ra'ui lahem sheyichalu pnei avihem b'moto litzavot et Yosef mipiv. If he really knew, they should have begged Yaakov to command Yosef directly. Call Yosef in and say, yes, the brothers did a bad thing to you, but it's time to bury the hatchet and it's time to put this behind us. Ki yisapana v'lo yamrad dvaro. Obviously, he wouldn't reject what Yaakov asks him. Says the Ramban, the psukim in Vayichi are clear that they're a lie, right? The idea that Yaakov told the messengers to tell Yosef to be good to the brothers, says the Ramban, if it really happened, Yaakov would have told Yosef directly. The brothers never told Yaakov because he never knew. That's the Ramban's real proof. The brothers didn't have the guts to tell Yaakov the truth, because he would be furious with them and he would curse them, and that's a terrible thing to have happen. However, they pretended to have told him the truth in that they sent messengers to Yosef to say, Yaakov told you to be good to the brothers. Yosef knew it was a lie. He never told them. Maybe the brothers didn't know that Yosef never told Yaakov. But the Ramban is telling us, Yosef never told Yaakov. The brothers never told Yaakov. Yaakov died in complete ignorance of the evil that the brothers did to Yosef. Again, how that plays out in the relationship between Yosef and the brothers, maybe we'll do that next week. For now, that's it for today, for Parshas Vayigash. Shabbat Shalom, and see you next week. Bye-bye.